Well, it looks like everybody's going to has joined. So
Well,
our committee
give
leads
me
can
30
take it
seconds.
away.
I'm gonna walk out of my car into my office. I will be on a full computer in about 30 seconds. But Lucy, why don't you kick us off, and I'll listen along until I get back into my office.
Okay, perfect. Oh, well, welcome. Thank y'all for being here and making time on Friday afternoon. I know we had a bit of rescheduling, so thank you for the patience. As we have landed on meeting today. What we have done, we've put together just a fairly brief agenda based on y'all's feedback from the survey that you submitted after. Can y'all hear me?
What's that, Lucy?
Okay. And we wanted to just go ahead and sort of clarify what our mission is. And I think that's where our coaches coming in right now can be helpful in giving us, I think what would be great to start off with just a recap of what the timeline is for this year. When we need to sort of have the report somewhat finalized. If y'all could just give us down of what this year will look like, I think that'll be a good guide before we launch into what that looks like for us.
Yeah, absolutely. And the steering committee's meeting right after this meeting. So we reserve the right to fine tune and adjust as as things go forward. But right now, the overall picture is that we're gonna confirm with Catawba College that we will have our next in-person meeting July 15th. And so that is a goal to have the draft reports from each committee by June 30. That gives the steering committee a couple of weeks to sort through, organize, figure out how we're going to run that in-person meeting so that we can have the best discussion of our preliminary findings. And if we kind of work backwards from that, so June 30 is when you want to have it in a decent, written draft of here are the things we chose to focus on. Here is the research we used. If there was a very, big sticking point, this one issue, we couldn't really come to agreement on. So we're going to leave it kind of, on the table and point it out. But here are things that we agreed on, right? Here are things that we do well. Here are things that need changing. And we're not talking about a 25-page report. I think, I hate to put numbers out there, but 5 to 10 pages, something like that. By the time you do, what you focused on, where the research came from, you already got a couple pages right there. So we want to focus on, kind of high level recommendations. So if you work back from that, you probably, if you're putting that together in June, you probably want to have some idea by March of the things that you're really going to focus down on. What are those priority items that people are confused about or that people complain about? Some of that public input's going to help there. March and April time frame, and then the end of April and May really start to, hone down and say, but we're hoping to have research assistance for students at that point, but we may not get them until next fall because that's also April, May is their, exam time, that kind of thing. So you may be doing a lot of this. But that would be the time to kind of be pulling together, here are the things we want to, in the end, recommend, and then, kind of divide up how you're gonna write that up, and then have that to the steering committee by June 30. Does that help? And then, so the in-person meeting, July 15th, a lot of discussion, adjustments, changes, overlap, collaboration, that kind of thing. The steering committee is going to take all that input, sift through it. We're also going to be running election town halls, so it's going to be a busy time, August, September. We reserve the right to take a little bit of time on that, but the preliminaries will be discussed with each committee. During that time, the steering committee will work with each committee, and we hope to have a final report by either December or January in polished form, etc. At that point, we will have another in-person meeting to actually present it to the community. and be available for, you know, questions from the press or the public or whatever. So we haven't picked a date for that one just yet. Did I get it pretty well there, Rachel?
Yeah, I think you summarized everything perfectly.
Okay. Any
Awesome.
questions?
Yeah, no questions on my end. Any questions from anybody else in our crew here? Before we go too much further, I think we all know each other, but it might be good just to refresh our recollection of who everybody is. So how about your name, sort of what brings you to this space? And since it's a Friday afternoon, tell me your weekend plans, because, you know, that's always fun. So I'll start. I'm Damon Circosta. My most recent sort of election-oriented gig was I chaired the North Carolina Board of Elections in 2019 through 2023. My weekend consists of a little bit of Frisbee golf, if my foot holds up. And then on Monday, I'll get to hang out with Andy Jackson, which will be fun because I'll see him at a meeting that we both will be at on Monday. So there it is. Who's next?
Yes, I've been tagged. Oh, well, Lucy.
Okay. I'm Lucy Russell Pittman. I'm joining y'all from Wilson. Let's see. And what brought me here is I've been teaching second grade, but now I work in policy, in education policy. But what I'm doing this weekend is there's an NC State researcher who they're documenting when Langston Hughes did a tour through Wilson County. And so they're doing a whole like Langston Hughes event all day tomorrow, where we're going to an elementary school and then going to a rally. So it'll be interesting. I need to brush up on my poetry before I go, but I'll pass it to Andy since I stole a mic from you.
That's fine. Andy Jackson, I'm with the John Locke Foundation. I basically complain about the government for a living, which is kind of nice. Do a bit of writing on election policy, so that kind of drew me in. I think Chris Cooper was the one that said, "Hey, maybe we should have Andy," and so you can blame him.
That was a good call on Chris's part, by the way.
Yeah, I guess I'll talk. I see Catherine on my right, so I guess I'll make her next.
Thanks, Andy. Yeah, Chris Cooper is the reason I'm here too. Catherine Comp, I worked with him before, longtime journalist, and he, I think, appreciated my communications background and thought that would be of value. I work for the NC Local News Workshop out of Elon University, and I'm the editor of their weekly NC Local newsletter, all about the news and information ecosystem. And I am located in the beautiful Western North Carolina mountains, South Asheville. All right, Leslie, do you want to go
Yes,
next?
I can go. So I'm Leslie Garvin, and I'm the Executive Director of North Carolina Campus Engagement, and we're a coalition of 39 colleges and universities in the state. Part of our mission is strengthening democracy, and so election engagement has been a part of our portfolio since 2008. So anything election related that supports young folks, I'm on board. And this weekend, my intention is to relax, and I will pass it to Jennifer.
So everybody knows who I am, but I've been working with the Carter Center since 2021. And the first in 2022, we did a bunch of town halls. And by the way, we're going to do 2 of those in May this year, election town halls, because our development folks want to have a couple of things for some of the Carter Center donors and some of the Catawba College donors to attend to kind of see what we're doing. Now, these aren't technically election commission events, but certainly the public input we get from them can be used for this commission. And one of them is going to be in the mountains and one's going to be in the Triangle. We don't have venues yet, but we may ask for help with this committee to help get the word out. And again, we want to do surveys at the end of each event to kind of gather audience input, and that's part of what we're trying to do in this commission. And then for the weekend, I'm surprised nobody's mentioned the Super Bowl. That is this weekend, right?
It is this weekend. You are correct.
Yeah, my husband's dragging me to a Super Bowl party, so that's Sunday. But Saturday, I've been invited to be on a panel at for the Muslim Students Association at Queen's University. They have a number of folks who are very concerned about um, sort of Islamophobia and hate that has come out of all the recent international events. And so we're watching a film, and then I'm going to be on a panel with a sort of in reaction to it. And I'm a little nervous about that because it's just such a fraught topic. And you know, people on both sides of that issue have been targeted, killed, you know, horrible, horrible things. So I'm asking anybody who is prone to do that to pray for me on Saturday to make sure that I can say things in an empathetic way without, it's just so hard. Anyway, sorry to be the
You're
downer.
going to be great, Jennifer. You're going to be great.
You'll be fine. And it's important work. I mean, not to try and tie it to what we're doing here, but this Carter Center work is intentionally across lines of differences. And I think that's a muscle we all need to exercise more, especially as the world gets more and more polarized around every issue. Rachel, you are here as part of us, even though you're staffing us. So I want you to join in the reindeer game. So Rachel.
Hi, everyone. I'm Rachel. I am the North Carolina state coordinator with the Carter Center. So I've been helping Bob and Jennifer and working on organizing the election commission. This weekend, I am potentially heading back up to Virginia to hand my real estate agent the keys to our home. We're in the process of trying to list it and sell it so that we can move back to North Carolina full time. And then on Sunday, going off what Jennifer said, I am here to watch Taylor Swift win the Super Bowl. So looking forward to that.
There it is. Are you ready for it? Oh my goodness. Let the games begin. So thank you one and all. We didn't miss anybody, did we?
Wait.
We got everybody.
Tom, we didn't hear from Tom.
We didn't hear from Tom. Oh, there you are, Tom. Come on, Tom.
Well, I guess I'm the old man in the group here. My background is broadcasting and recently writing columns for newspapers across the state. I've been covering politics since 1965, so that's my primary interest in watching and commenting on it. And I want to apologize. I missed the last committee meeting because I wasn't aware of it and figured it out after the fact, and apologize to Damon for missing it. One question I wanted to ask, I love the idea of the town halls. I'm wondering, is there anything being done so far as mass education of the public, so far as election laws and getting out the vote is concerned?
Tom, are you skipping ahead on the agenda? I'm looking
No,
at what we're up to next.
I hadn't seen the agenda, so I don't know.
Well, the beautiful segue. And once we get Jim Morrill, who's connecting to audio, to introduce himself, to tell us how he came to this work, and then to tell us what he's doing this weekend, we'll jump right into your very question, Tom. So Jim, I know you just joined us. We're doing introductions. Who are you? Why are you here? And what are you doing this weekend?
Jim Morrill. Sorry, I'm late. I covered politics for 40 years for the Charlotte Observer, and they asked me to do this. And for this weekend, I don't know, doing some chores around the house and going to an engagement party.
Well, there you go. Well, Jim, you missed a whole bunch of conversation about how wonderful, some might say top 10, Charlotte is as a city. And we were all very, very proud to hear that those rankings came out. By the way, Raleigh also did okay too, but we won't have to dwell on that any longer. Okay, so to Tom's point, here, let me give you a little preview of the agenda as we see it for today. We want to talk a little bit about our bandwidth and our roles and responsibilities as a group, right? We all have busy lives and lots of things going on, and yet we've taken this opportunity to work on this commission in the hopes of improving our elections here in North Carolina. So we got to talk a little bit about bandwidth. Then we need to jump into Tom's specific, which is what sort of strategies and approaches do we want to take as a group And specifically, Tom, around those conversations, right? We've noticed what we got a lot of feedback from you all was there are a tremendous amount of election administration changes afoot. And with litigation constantly back and forth, we don't know precisely how things are going to shake out until very late in the year. And so with all that being said, how do we communicate to voters writ large what the rules of the game is doing? I see Jennifer in the chat saying that Paul Cox is doing a webinar for us on these very things on February 13th. So hopefully we'll have some sort of consensus by the summer of what election changes that affect voters will be. And then I think this committee's job is can we come up with some strategies and possibly some good content to help voters navigate the morass in a way that isn't being fed from partisan actors, isn't being fed from the government itself, which has a woefully, in my estimation, under-resourced capabilities to do this work. So that's the bulk of our conversation today. Then we'll finish up with a little, closing remarks, Q&A, next steps, action items. So does that sound like a good agenda for everybody today? Anybody want to add anything before we kind of jump in? All right, let's do bandwidth first. When the fine folks, and one of those fine folks is in the room, Jennifer, asked me to participate, they said this was not an inordinately heavy lift, but there would be some work to it. And the idea behind it was get a bunch of people from different political persuasions, different sort of perspectives on how elections run, and come together to see if we can work together to improve. Half of our committee's here, half of our committee is not. We all have busy lives. So maybe the open question to start with is, what sort of level of work do we think realistically we as a group can undertake in the next couple of months? Jennifer at the beginning of this laid out, here's some of the deliverables we want. Question to you all, is that too much? Are there things beyond those deliverables we want to do? Where are we as a group?
Well, I'll speak up. I think that it is very, very important, as Jennifer said, for the public to understand the changes that have been made in the election laws in North Carolina. I think also it's terribly important, if we can, to try to reaffirm and reestablish the integrity of election systems in North Carolina and the trustworthiness of them, so that people will know that when they go to the polls and cast a ballot, their votes will be received, recorded, and reported accurately and truthfully. And there's been enough noise going on throughout the country about the integrity of the election system that I think that we in North Carolina have a great opportunity to be able to try to let our 7 million voters know that they can trust it.
Thanks, Tom. Other thoughts? Leslie, I know you work in an educational environment, right? You spend a lot of time with young people across campuses. Test our assumptions. Is this committee was created as the kind of on the fly at the last meeting. The idea is that there needs to be some way in which we be thinking about dissemination. I'm assuming we're all agreeing on the what, that we need to do the two things Tom just talked about, integrity of the elections and process. Leslie, can you talk a little bit about maybe how, or your ideas on some potential hows that this group could go about working?
Yeah, so the most important thing for me to say is that there are people who are working really hard, particularly on college campuses, to promote civic education. We had our annual voter summit. Paul Cox did the exact same thing he's going to do on the 13th for the students. That reps from like 23 campuses. Next week, I'm bringing together our presidents and the Bipartisan Policy Center from DC will be down to talk to them how they can prepare their campuses for elections. And so the most important thing that I just want to say is we need to come alongside people who are already doing intentional work. You know, I think all of us have had the experience of, and you have no idea how many organizations come into the state every year and say, someone needs to get college students motivated. And we've got a whole coalition of 10 of us, 10 organizations. And so for me, that's the method, is to, I think I talked a little bit about this the last time, asset map, who's on the ground in different communities that we want to target, right? If it's folks of Latino descent, who can talk to them? If it's those of us who are on the ground on college campuses, who's already doing the work? And where are there possibly gaps? There might be communities no one's talking to, right? So for me, that when we talk about the method, what's important for me is that we already understand, right? Like Generation Next, the folks who are doing civic engagement in K through 12, DPI, who has civic learning. So for me, that's the most important thing, is that we're not recreating the wheel, but that we really are doing it in a really collaborative way with the people that really already have those relationships, right? So that, I don't know if that's the answer but to your question, but that's top of mind for me.
May I ask Jennifer and Rachel, is there potentially any budget for being able to use for mass communication?
So one of the things that the Carter Center is doing right now is interviewing and hiring a national PR firm. They are supposed to have people on the ground in each of the 6 states where the Carter Center is working, because we emphasized that it is not one size fits all in the United States of America. And if you don't have somebody in North Carolina who knows the culture, the history, the political environment, doing that messaging, it's not gonna really work. So how much that's gonna be, how much we have, for paid advertising, we don't know. There'll be somebody. Up till now, this initiative has relied on people using their own social media accounts and working with partners like the League of Women Voters, like college campuses, like You Can Vote, all those other groups. We've relied on just collaboration and sharing and social media. That is not enough. And so we'll have to see what the Carter Center budget is, but we will have something in North Carolina to help. It may end up being messaging to share in our already established networks, but we're hoping it will also be some paid media.
Well, the reason I brought this up is the North Carolina Association of Broadcasters has a really neat program in which they work with all of the TV and radio stations across the state, and for good causes. And this is certainly as good as any I know about. They will let you pay to the association a fee. That's how they raise money. But then they will disseminate your pre-recorded messages on TV and radio, which will be aired across the state. And you're not guaranteed how many times they're going to run, or when they're going to run, or exactly which stations they will run on. But I have used this in the past for several different causes with which I have worked. And I have found that from a value received point of view, they get somewhere around 10 times the amount of exposure on radio and television stations all across the state, because most all of them are members of the North Carolina Association of Broadcasters, than they would get if you just tried to give them public service announcements. The TV and radio stations have made a commitment to the association, candidly, as a quid pro quo, to keep their membership dues down every year. They agree, and they're all required to run a certain amount of public service advertising and messaging during the course of the year. So there's a quid pro quo here. We're going to keep your dues down. You're going to guarantee us that when we come to you with these messages, that you will air them. And
Tom,
so,
that's a wonderful point, and I think we might need to ask you for a connect at some point. I'll just say personal experience when I used to do election reform work, we used the broadcaster service, and we got our Hunt Holzhauser ad on the Super Bowl. They somehow messed up, I think, and ended up putting one of those broadcasting ones on the Super Bowl and happened to be ours. Jim, I see you have your hand up,
if they have avails,
right?
they'll run them in avails, and I can make the contacts and know the people and so forth like that.
Helpful, thank you. Jim, you have your hand up.
I think the ideas about the college campuses and what Tom was talking about are great ideas. I would also go kind of old school and do op-eds. I know the circulation of mainstream papers like the Observer and the NNO have gone down, so that would reach a limited audience. But Catherine could speak to this too about, all the new news sites that have popped up, like the Charlotte Ledger here, and Asheville Watchdog, different. I think these have popped up all over the state, and it would be good to connect with them too, and to do the equivalent of an op-ed on those sites.
Good call. Good call. So I'm hearing, oh, Andy?
Sorry, yeah, I'm old school hand.
Andy, you just raised your regular hand like a human. Look at you.
Yeah. No, I was gonna say I'm already planning on doing an op-ed later on, late spring. I'll probably run it by. I'm not sure who I should run it by on our end here. I guess Chris, since he's the one that brought me on, but maybe somebody else, maybe Rachel. But in that vein, I'm already planning on writing one, which is my working title right now is "Why Am I Working with the Carter Center?" Because people that read me will be interested in that topic. But yeah, I agree with Jim, and I do plan to do something. So it wouldn't be like an official release from us. It'll be just for me, but it'll be in that same vein.
Jim, do you know whether the Newspaper Association has a similar type program to NCAB?
I don't. That's a good question. No, I don't have any idea right now. I don't know how many newspapers are still members of that, or how many newspapers there are.
Yeah, that we've got a couple of uphill battles, and Andy, I really appreciate the notion of an op-ed like that, and I hope that the Carter Center will help you out with dissemination and all that. It sounds to me like there's not a lot of discussion around content, that we've kind of hit our two main goals, right? Bolstering up the, where warranted, the security and the trustworthiness of the election system, and sharing with the public at large some of the changes they might expect and why. I think what I'm most concerned about on the latter end is, especially with photo ID not getting the rollout that it deserves, a lot of people will be encumbered in having it show up for the first time. And I think that for whatever, especially if we can work across partisan, there's a value there to making sure people don't lose their opportunity. Catherine, I see your hand up.
Yeah, so a couple thoughts. With those prongs that you just kind of summarized with the op-eds, I think a lot of the newer digital news sites don't really air those traditionally. But what they might be interested in is more resources and sources that they could interview for their own stories. So connecting that to the asset mapping, if we could develop sort of a database of all these groups on the ground, what they're doing, contact info, distribute that to different media organizations, they might get inspired to cover that work. Another thought about the op-eds is it would be really cool if there was a kind of shared byline with Democrat, Republican, Independent. And then also with changes people might expect and why, I guess I'm going to kind of throw out there that I'm not sure if that would be kind of redundant work. There are a lot of news organizations covering that. There are all the different boards of elections are trying to get information out there too. So what is already being done there, and where could we be supportive? And the final point I'll bring up is something that came up yesterday was that yesterday? I think so. In the Elections Administration Committee was sort of tied to several different things, including like the difficulties in recruiting and retaining poll workers. A lot of people don't know how elections work. So thinking beyond this year, what kind of things are needed in civic education to both educate the general public that your election system is safe and secure, but also to help recruit new people to these elections boards that really are suffering from a lack of staff and retention.
Lucy, I feel as co-chair, why you got your hand up? I just say something. You drive for a while.
I don't want to jump the line when people.
Well, after you're done, you get to decide who between Jim and Leslie goes, and I'm telling you that's a big question you got to answer.
Well, I wanted to just show y'all something, and this is the second grade teacher in me to have a visual, but I got this in the mail this week and I felt like it was divine timing. I don't know if it's flip-flopped on y'all's screen, but it's from the State Board of Education of Elections. And it said it went out to just any residential customer, and it's about photo ID. It gives the dates for the primary calendar. And I thought it was such a good example of voter outreach that they're doing. I think what would be really helpful from our end is if potentially, I don't know if Mr. Cox is the right avenue to ask of the State Board of Elections, but if we can ask them, what's the existing outreach plan? How many mailers are you sending out? Is it going to every single registered voter? I think just having a sense of the baseline where the, governmental entity responsible for civic education, like what they're doing. And I think that could help when we're looking at the asset mapping as well. But I just wanted to show it off while we're talking about it. Leslie, did you have your hand up?
I did. Yeah, so this is sort of building on both of the what you and Catherine have both shared. And it seems to me one of our recommendations, or even something that we could determine a pathway forward with, is new media or new collateral, right? So yes, I am certain that the Board of Education is going to do some great postcards. They're going to do some really neat things, but there's so many other ways to talk to communities, particularly younger folks and others, to just remove the stigma. So for example, my father just moved down. We moved my parents down from Ohio, and I haven't been able to get him a driver's license. And so we took advantage of the new voter ID. When I tell you it was the easiest thing that I have ever done in my entire life, not to mention the fact we went to Guilford County at 8:30 in the morning and there was nobody there, 8 in the morning. But I mean, it literally is a form, right? You have to have your social security number. You go and take the photo. Y'all, if I had just seen a video, because I was so stressed about it. When I tell you that I printed out my dad's investment portfolio front page, because I was like, I need to show his residency, right? Like I need to prove he lives here. Then I went and I looked for some old Medicare mailers. It was the easiest thing I've ever done. And then he takes a picture and he laughed, and it's for 10 years. If there had just been a 3-minute video, I could have clicked on the Board of Elections or somewhere else and just said, this is how you get the new voter ID if you don't have an alternative ID. So for me, that has to be a key part of our recommendation, or at least something that we can even find some media outlets or other folks who are interested in creating new media or something that could partner with the Board of Elections and do some of this. Or it could just be another organization that takes the lead on it. But anyway, I just needed to get that out because it was so easy.
The Wake County Board of Elections has a video on how to get your ID.
Yeah, I think one of the good things that we do have, and what this conversation surfacing for me, is content is out there. And to Leslie's point, we probably don't need to recreate the wheel. I think the key for this thing is probably making connections. And Jim, I see your hand up and I jumped in there. So why don't you go ahead and go?
No, I was just going to follow up on whoever was talking about IDs, and I was at UNC Charlotte yesterday, and somebody told me that students carry around electronic IDs a lot of times, and I don't think those are going to be acceptable. That you've got to have a card. Leslie probably knows this, but that's something to get out to.
They're not acceptable currently, but they are looking into it. Yes.
One thought that's stirring too is that I know like voter ID is so top of mind for us right now, but I do want to push us to sort of expand how we can help civic muscle, like build civic muscle beyond learning the details about voter ID, right? Like how can we make sure citizens feel empowered to know how to vote, even with whatever, future changes could happen. And thinking more long term too. I don't know what that looks like at all, but I don't know. Just thinking of the broader scope of voting, I think is important.
I just texted my good buddy, the public information officer at the State Board of Elections, Pat Gannon, to ask him for what their voter outreach plan is, and I'll make sure to forward that along, so that we're all aware of it. So I don't know if I'm circling back to the bandwidth question or asking it anew. Already in this conversation, it seems like we've got overlapping and often disparate networks. We've got ideas on how we can sort of get these two ideas or information into the world. I think what we probably need to start thinking about is how do we put together a sort of a cohesive, cogent plan to engage all of us in that work. Jennifer, I know that we're sort of looking for a report to happen in mid-June, and I wonder, and I'll be curious to hear what the rest of this committee thinks, whether or not this committee needs a separate assignment. We could certainly put together here are our facts and findings, and we know that lots of changes are happening and people are unaware, all that sort of stuff. Or might this committee's job be putting together a plan beforehand, before all the stuff comes in June, July, to think about ways in which we could help disseminate all the good forward? Am I out of order? Am I messing things up? Can you react to what I just said?
No, I think that's great. That's why I put that in the chat. You kind of have you're a unique committee.
Oh, look at this. There's something in the chat.
Not just because you sprang out of the day, you were created on the spur of the moment, but also because you have the dual role of coming up with recommendations of exactly what you asked Pat Gannon, like how we do it now, and then where are the gaps? Is that adequate? So recommendations for going forward. But then you also have the role of being part of the dissemination of information for the current electoral cycle. And that was something Tom Campbell, if I remember, was very adamant about at our meeting, that we shouldn't just be doing a report for 2020, for December or January. We should also be helping inform people here and now. The election town halls are part of that. But you all could also be one of the few committees doing a lot of work in August, September, October, when other committees have done most of theirs, are kind of, sorting through and refining things. You all might still actually be engaging. So you have kind of a dual role.
Heard. Thank you. Well, what do we do now then, right? Do we could certainly spend some more time, and I am mindful that we gave ourselves an hour here and we're down to the last 15 minutes. Would it be out of order to task Rachel with when she's coming up with these notes? I don't necessarily want to task her with assigning roles, but it sounds to me like we've got a couple things that we were committing to do. One, we'll put the findings together, and that should be relatively easy. I don't think we need to do much more work on that side. But should we start thinking about maybe spending 5 or 10 minutes here brainstorming about different avenues in which we could use that are similar to some of the things that people already said to do that dissemination work. And then in our next meeting, which I'm thinking is sometime in the next 30 or so days, we start hammering that out. Does that sound like I want to be respectful of people's time. I want to make sure that we're getting good input while we got ourselves together. I don't want to overly burden staff. Somebody help me out here. Is this a good use of our last 5-10 minutes? Just starting to throw a few more ideas on the table?
So we're brainstorming venues or pathways to disseminate the information.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've already, Leslie, you've got a network that you certainly could use, some goosing from us. Tom's point about the broadcasters, Catherine's point about, hey, not all of the world is listening to, broadcast TV spots. So maybe we can think of other more, God, I'm going to sound like such an old man, more electronic ways in which to do this work. I swear I'm younger than I look. I swear it.
And going back to your old school, why couldn't we develop a speech which we uniformly, all the members of the entire committee could use? And I got to tell you, Rotary clubs and Kiwanis clubs and civic clubs are always hungry to have speakers come and talk about relevant subjects. And I think, I mean, for instance, when you're talking to some of these groups, they're influential people and they can spread the word to others, and like throwing a pebble into a pond.
Perfect. I like that idea too. Let's keep going. Andy, help us out. You're in the information dissemination biz. Give us some ideas.
Frankly, I don't have any new ideas at the moment. I'm sure I'll come up with something in the next 4.5 minutes.
I love your idea about op-eds, and
That was
I
Jim's, but okay.
well, and
I'm
I
just
also
going with
love
the flow.
I love the idea of unusual man bites dog sort of things. Why is the guy who writes for John Locke working with the Carter Center, right? And I would love to co-author something with somebody that I can send all my hippie ass liberal friends. And did I say that out loud? Yes, I did. And why are we working together on this? That type of stuff. Jim?
I was going to say that, following up on what Tom said about speeches and what Andy was talking about, maybe we could come up with like a template of talking points that could either go into an op-ed or a speech if somebody's speaking to the Rotary Club or something.
Exactly.
Bullet points that we could, flesh out, stuff about election security, stuff about the changes, which we'll find out more about next week, Jennifer, right? And so I don't know if we did something like that you could use it in different formats.
I like that idea. Catherine, you were going to say something, and if not, I'll go to Jennifer.
Yeah, a strategy that I know a lot of North Carolina advertisers are starting to use, and brands, is finding influencers. So what are North Carolina's, maybe they're musicians or artists or foodies or something, but they also care about voting and democracy, and could they help disseminate information?
An influencer project. That's what Jennifer was going to say. Right, Jennifer?
That is one of the two things I'm going to say. So absolutely. In fact, Bob Orr brought this up at our last meeting of all the 6 states. And his idea is to use the NIL, name, image, likeness, that college athletes are now allowed to use.
Oh, interesting.
And to do spots with, okay, I forgot the guy who just made all the goals, but a lot of the college athletes are followed really closely in North Carolina. Don't laugh at me, Damon.
Jennifer, it was just so funny because I don't even know what sport you were talking about. It was just like insert generic sports talk. The guy who touched down the base home run. Go ahead. Sorry.
The basketball player at Chapel Hill is so awesome. His name just flew out of my head. But there are a lot of those athletes, right? Women's soccer. I mean, there's so many great athletes, and they could do little spots about, I'm doing my civic duty, I'm voting, I'm honoring the election workers, I'm not harassing them, they're doing a great job, just little things like that. So that is absolutely something that we could do, and this would be a great committee to think about who and what to do, and maybe even come up with some of the copy for that, because whatever PR firm they hire is going to need for local people to put together the irrelevant words. Because they're not going to, yeah. So the second thing is I'm worried you skipped over the first part a little bit fast, because we still do need an assessment of how does information get to people now? Is there something that we could do better that other states do, that the election, academics talk about, that would be better at getting out good information, because there's a lot of bad information out there, right? So we need to also assess kind of how is it being done now? Is this good, bad? Or do we keep it? Do we do more? Do we recommend things? And then we need to do all the things you talked about with getting our networks together and getting influencers and all that. So just want to make sure we didn't skip over that first part.
As a
Noted
next
and heard.
step, sorry. As a next step, can we send out sort of a request to the academics in the cohort and ask them what kind of sort of evidence-based research they have around that? Because I see we have a white paper on communicating with voters to build trust in our folder, but it doesn't have sort of messaging points that I think we're talking about that can be used in the speakers bureau, in the op-eds, in, the radio bits, that I think will be helpful. So if we could ask, I don't know if Martha would be the best person to reach out to, but that would be great, to go ahead and compile things. And then Leslie, I see your hands up.
Yeah, I just want to keep in top of mind whatever collateral, whatever talking points, to try to consider bilingual ways of dissemination.
Heard. Thank you. That's a good point indeed. Okay. We're supposed to review action steps, which I think we're kind of into here. Who's gonna reach out to the academics in our group?
I can do that.
Great. I will ping the State Board of Elections to get a better feel for what they're doing and share that with the group. I'll also ask them if they've got thoughts from other states on what they're doing to, if they can point me to some resources there. Tom said he would reach out to the broadcasters. We're probably not ready for that just yet, Tom, but be on ready alert for that. What other,
Catherine has volunteered in the chat to put together research on what current NC boards are doing. So you're talking about the on-the-ground boards, not just what
perfect.
Damon's doing.
Yeah, the local boards, I thought maybe I could start by reaching out to like 5 smaller counties and 5 larger ones and request their communications plans for this year.
That'd be a great idea. If I were suggesting 5 counties, might I ask you to put Forsyth on the list of the big counties?
Mhm.
Partially because their executive director is best in class. And so he's done a really good job with public stuff. He does a thing where he runs people through the actual election apparatus so they understand how it works. Andy's raising his hand. Oh no, he said just 1 minute. No. Go, Andy, go.
Sorry, I got a phone call I got to take.
Oh, that's just 1 minute. That wasn't, I'm you're talking. You take your phone call, Andy. We won't listen in. It'll be fine. So Catherine, if I could just request Forsyth County, and if I don't have great, super deep relationships with most of the county board folks, but some of the bigger ones I do. So if you need some help with introductions, just let me know. All right, what other to-dos do we have? And what are we missing? What was left unsaid?
So next Tuesday, Paul Cox is going to give that. We're going to record that and try to keep it to less than 30 minutes so that it's not, doesn't go on and on, so people don't want to watch it. So one thing would be to, think about people who might be good to send that link to once it's recorded.
Good point. Yes.
And you can invite people to join too. People who are, election nerds, they can join.
Meanwhile, as far as this committee's work, you'll have to forgive. I think I was the holdup in the last meeting. So sorry about that if it was me. But maybe it might make sense. And I'm asking Rachel and maybe Lucy and I can put our heads together and just get like a standing meeting time just quick show of hands, if you were to pick a Tuesday afternoon or a Friday afternoon, which would you pick? Tuesday, raise your hand. Friday, raise your hand. Oh man. Well, what do we do when it's a tie? You know, in North Carolina law, we just flip a coin. And well, actually, it's a random number generator, but we have ways to resolve ties. Well, I'll tell you what, Rachel, Lucy, and I will get back and we'll choose one of those 2 afternoons. Is there anybody in this group who neither of those that will work for? Okay, good. So we'll go work on that. And if you have any dying, burdensome scheduling things, just ping Rachel or me or Lucy, and we'll get to work on it.
Next meeting date.
Oh man, I was trying to put that off so we
Well-
could talk first.
Yeah, I need to get them on the calendar so that I can make sure I get them.
I'm going to suggest that it was a tie and that I know Fridays work a little better for me. I'm going to suggest Friday, March 1st. If there's an objection, raise your hand.
The only thing is, I think Martha has a class that goes until 3:20 on Fridays. That's why she couldn't be here today.
Ah, would anybody have an objection to starting at 3:20? Andy's like, man, this is the last thing between him and the weekend. He's like,
Well,
come on.
maybe, well, we might want to make it 3:30 so she has a chance to walk down the hall.
Oh, you were actually being nicer than I was. And look at me being the jerk. All right, let's do that. Let's go ahead and set it for March 1st at 3:30. Rachel can send out an invite. Rachel, if you could send that to my ajf.org address as well, that'd be great.
Absolutely. So we can plan for March 1st. I just need to verify. She has one other committee that has a recurring meeting on Fridays at 3:30. I just want to make sure that there's not going to be a conflict with this. So we can plan for that. If there is, I'll circle back with you and we can try to figure something else out. But I will
Sounds
go
good.
ahead and take a look at that.
Thank you, Rachel. That's good stuff. Okay, so tentatively we're on for March 1st at 3:30. If something changes, we'll let you know. If you observe Super Bowl Sunday, I hope your team wins. If that team happens to be the team that Taylor Swift's boyfriend's on, I hope it even more. And there it is.
Not to put your thumb on the scale.
Not to put your thumb on the scale at all. And I'd like to pretend that it's my 14-year-old daughter who got me into Taylor Swift, because that seems a little bit more acceptable, but it's not true. I was into Taylor before she was. That's just all there is to it. And now you know my secret. All right, anything else we want to say before we depart? You all are wonderful people, and I'm enjoying working with you. I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, y'all. Bye.